Imagine this: a city drowning in rain, two broken souls on a collision course with fate. What happens when a stranger's pain calls out to your own? Welcome to Emotion Waves. The rain fell in relentless sheets that night, drumming against the pavement, the rooftops, and every surface of the city with a sound that was almost deafening. The streetlights cast blurred circles of gold on the wet asphalt, reflecting off puddles like shattered pieces of a dream Ethan couldn't quite remember. Each step he took splashed through shallow water, cold seeping through his shoes and climbing up his legs. But he barely noticed. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside him, the heaviness he had carried for months pressing down on his chest, refusing to let him breathe properly. He had left the office late, exhausted not only from the endless tasks and deadlines, but from the gnawing emptiness that had become his constant companion. He usually walked fast, ignoring the drizzle, rushing home to the solitude of his apartment, where the silence of the room felt almost comforting compared to the chaos of the world outside. But tonight, something made him slow down. Maybe it was the unusual stillness of the streets, almost empty at this late hour, or maybe it was the feeling that something or someone was waiting for him in the rain. And then he saw her. But wait, could one moment in the rain change everything? Stay with Emotion Waves to find out. At first, she was just a shadow beneath the flickering streetlight, her form blurred and shifting with the downpour. Her hair clung to her face and shoulders, soaked, strands plastered to pale skin. She didn't move. She didn't reach for an umbrella. She didn't even seem to notice the rain drenching her completely. Her head was bowed slightly, hands clutching something close to her chest, and her figure radiated a fragility that made Ethan stop mid-step. There was something haunting about the way she stood, like she had carried the storm inside her long before this night. Normally, he would have kept walking. He didn't approach strangers. He didn't involve himself in the unknown troubles of people he had never met. But tonight felt different. There was a pull he couldn't explain, a quiet insistence inside him that said he should go to her, that no one should stand alone in such a storm. Something in the way she trembled, almost imperceptibly, struck a chord deep within him. Ethan stepped closer. "Hey," he called softly, unsure if she could even hear him over the rain. She flinched slightly but didn't turn. The way her body tensed made his heart ache. He crouched down a little, lowering himself to her level. "You don't have to stay out here by yourself. If you want, I can help." Slowly, her head lifted, and Ethan finally saw her eyes dark, glistening, and haunted. She didn't smile. She didn't speak immediately. Her lips trembled, and the faintest whimper escaped, swallowed quickly by the rain. Ethan could feel the weight she carried, the invisible burden pressing down on her like the storm pressing down on the city. She seemed to shrink into herself, desperate yet defiant, fragile yet somehow still standing. For a long moment, they simply regarded each other in silence, rain falling around them, each droplet echoing the heaviness of the night. Ethan's instincts told him to reach out, to offer warmth where there was none, and slowly, almost instinctively, he stepped closer, bridging the gap between two strangers brought together by fate in the fading storm. That night, for a single heartbeat, the world shrank to just the two of them, the girl in the rain, lost and broken, and the boy who couldn't turn away. The rain continued its steady rhythm, yet Ethan barely noticed. His focus was entirely on the figure before him, the girl who seemed like a fragile shadow under the flickering streetlight. She didn't move, didn't even raise her head. Each step he took felt heavier than the last, weighed down by the storm inside him and the storm outside. He had spent months trying to ignore the emptiness gnawing at his chest, but now, faced with someone whose pain mirrored his own, he felt it all in sharp relief. You're soaked," he said softly, his voice barely louder than the patter of rain. She flinched at his words, a subtle tremble that seemed to travel through her entire frame. He noticed how she clutched an envelope close to her chest, her knuckles white, as though holding on to it was the only thing keeping her anchored. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. The only sounds were the rhythmic splash of their footsteps and the relentless drumming of rain against the asphalt. Then, slowly, she lifted her head, revealing eyes rimmed with red, glistening with unshed tears. There was a vulnerability in her gaze that cut through the night, raw and unguarded. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. The only sounds were the rhythmic splash of their footsteps and the relentless drumming of rain against the asphalt. Then, Slowly, she lifted her head, revealing eyes rimmed with red, glistening with unshod tears. There was a vulnerability in her gaze that cut through the night, raw and unguarded. I just needed to be somewhere," she whispered, her voice fragile, barely audible over the storm. Her admission was simple, yet it carried a weight far heavier than any words could contain. Ethan could feel it. The invisible burden she carried, the secret sorrow she had brought into the night. He nodded slowly, keeping his tone gentle. "Sometimes, you don't need to explain yourself," he said. "It's enough to just be, just to exist. Sometimes, that's all that matters." He offered his jacket without thinking, hoping the warmth might give her something more than just protection from the cold. She hesitated, unsure, but eventually allowed him to drape it over her shoulders, the fabric heavy but comforting. A shiver ran through her, and for a moment, her head dipped slightly, as if she wanted to disappear entirely into herself. But Ethan didn't look away. He simply stood beside her, silent, letting her know she wasn't alone. There was an unspoken understanding growing between them, two strangers finding solace in each other's presence. Two souls momentarily unburdened by the weight they had carried for far too long. Finally, she spoke again, this time with a small, almost timid voice. "I'm Lily," she said. Her name hung in the air like a fragile promise. Ethan repeated it silently in his mind, letting it sink deep into his thoughts. Lily. The sound seemed to fit her perfectly, delicate yet strong, a name for someone who had endured far too much. "I'm Ethan," he replied. His tone carried warmth, gentle and steady. "It's nice to meet you, Lily." He didn't know why he said it. Perhaps it was his way of grounding himself, or perhaps it was a simple acknowledgement that even in the coldest, wettest night, connection was still possible. The rain fell around them, steady and unyielding. Yet in that small circle of light under the street lamp, it felt like the storm had softened. The world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, suspended in a fragile moment of shared understanding. Lily exhaled slowly, letting a small fraction of her tension release. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, she felt the barest glimmer of safety. And Ethan, watching her, realized that even though he hadn't said much, he had already begun to care. The night stretched on, rain blurring the city around them, yet neither moved. For a fleeting, suspended moment, two broken hearts, one carrying a silent burden, the other a hidden emptiness, stood together, connected by the storm, and the first sparks of trust began to take root. The rain had softened into a gentle drizzle, though the puddles lining the uneven street still shimmered under the flickering streetlights. Ethan and Lily walked side by side, their footsteps echoing softly in the quiet city night. Neither spoke at first. Words felt unnecessary. The sound of the rain, the occasional distant horn, and the gentle splash of water underfoot formed a rhythm that matched the unspoken tension between them. Ethan glanced at her, careful not to stare too long. Her hair, damp and clinging to her face, partially hid her expression, but her eyes, though downcast, betrayed a depth he could not ignore. They were the eyes of someone who had carried too much for too long, someone whose life had been marked by silent storms that no one else could see. "You don't have to go anywhere if you don't want to," Ethan said quietly, breaking the silence. She looked at him briefly, startled by the warmth in his voice. Then, after a moment of hesitation, she nodded slightly, as if acknowledging that she didn't have to face the storm alone. The street was nearly deserted, wet pavement glistening beneath the scattered light. The city seemed to have paused for them, as if the world itself had softened, leaving only the two of them moving together through the rain. For Ethan, it felt almost surreal, as if time had slowed to let him walk alongside this girl who seemed fragile, yet somehow strong enough to endure the night. Lily's voice broke the silence, a soft whisper carried away almost immediately by the drizzle. I don't really know where I'm going," she admitted. Her words trembled, revealing vulnerability she had tried so hard to hide. "I just needed to get away from everything for a while." Ethan nodded, understanding more than she could know. "Sometimes," he said gently, "the only thing we can do is keep moving, even if we don't know the path. Just one step at a time." His words weren't meant to fix anything. They were simply acknowledgement, a way of letting her know that he saw her. that her struggle mattered. A cold gust of wind swept through the street, and Lily shivered, hugging herself instinctively. Without thinking, Ethan draped his jacket fully around her shoulders. She froze for a moment, hesitant to accept comfort from someone she barely knew. But then she relaxed into the warmth. It was a small gesture, yet it seemed to ease some invisible weight pressing her down. For the first time that night, she looked at him properly. Her eyes glistened with rain and unshod tears, and in them, Ethan could see the faintest flicker of trust. He felt a pull he didn't want to question, a need to stay, to walk with her through whatever storm had brought her here. "Thank you," she murmured, voice barely audible. It was simple, yet the word carried immense weight, a recognition that she had found a safe presence, however temporary, in the chaos surrounding her. The two of them continued walking, silence falling again. But this time it was not empty. It was a companionable quiet, filled with the subtle understanding that neither of them needed to fill it with words. Each step became a shared rhythm, a small act of trust, a fragile bridge connecting two hearts bruised by life. Eventually, they reached a small bus stop, its roof providing only partial shelter from the persistent drizzle. They stood side by side, watching the water ripple across the street, the faint reflections of the streetlights dancing in the puddles. The night was quiet, except for the gentle splash of rain and the occasional distant car. Lily exhaled slowly, releasing a breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. "It's easier to be here with someone," she admitted softly. There was no pride in her voice, only vulnerability and a quiet acceptance that maybe, for the first time in days, she was allowed to let herself feel safe. Ethan gave her a small, reassuring smile. "You're not alone tonight," he said. "And that is enough for now." The rain fell around them, relentless yet oddly comforting. In that small, dimly lit corner of the city, two strangers found a fleeting connection, an unspoken understanding that even amid storms both literal and emotional, someone could carry a piece of another's heart with them. For the first time, Lily allowed herself to believe that maybe the storm outside was not the only thing she could survive. But what secrets hide in that envelope she clutches? Keep listening on Emotion Waves. The streetlights flickered, casting long, wavering shadows on the wet pavement. Lily stood a few steps ahead of Ethan, still under the soft shelter of the bus stop roof, the rain drizzling lightly over the edges. Her figure seemed smaller somehow, hunched with a weight Ethan couldn't yet name. There was something fragile about her silhouette against the glowing light, as if the world outside had stopped, leaving only her to stand alone in the storm. Ethan hesitated for a moment, unsure how to approach. He didn't want to startle her or intrude. Yet something compelled him forward. He walked slowly, each step measured, careful not to break the fragile balance of trust that had begun to form between them. "You don't have to say anything," he murmured gently, stopping a few feet away. I don't want you to be alone." Lily's shoulders stiffened, and she looked up briefly, her eyes meeting his. They were dark, glistening, and carrying a sorrow so deep it made Ethan's chest tighten. Yet within those eyes, he also caught a spark of defiance, a quiet strength that refused to crumble entirely. She wasn't just someone lost in the rain. She was someone who had survived storms far worse than this. I'm not used to people stopping for me," she whispered finally, her voice trembling. There was shame, fear, and a hint of hope, all mingled together in her words. I don't know if I can trust anyone right now." Ethan nodded slowly, keeping his gaze gentle. "You don't have to trust me, not yet, but I'll be here. I'll walk with you through this moment, if that's enough." Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something more but couldn't find the courage. The rain fell softly around them, the rhythm almost hypnotic, filling the silence between words with a strange comfort. It was in this quiet that Ethan noticed the small envelope she still clutched tightly against her chest. He didn't ask about it yet. It wasn't his place. But he could see that it meant something to her, a fragment of her story that she wasn't ready to share. She began, hesitating, then stopped. She looked down, brushing a wet strand of hair from her face. "I don't know how to start telling someone about this. It's complicated." Her voice cracked slightly and Ethan's heart clenched. "You don't have to explain everything at once," he said softly. "Just start with what you can. I'll listen." She took a shaky breath, her hands loosening slightly around the envelope. I needed to get away," she said. voice almost lost. From everything. From people who didn't understand. From a life that felt too heavy. I didn't know where else to go. Ethan remained silent, letting her words sink in. He felt a deep pull of empathy, a quiet urge to protect her, to offer comfort where there had been none. He wanted to tell her that she wasn't alone anymore, that someone was willing to share the weight of her heart, but he didn't force the words. Instead, he simply stayed beside her, letting his presence speak for him. The rain continued to fall, gentle now, like the city itself was exhaling after the earlier storm. Lily finally allowed herself to lean slightly toward him, a small, almost imperceptible gesture of trust. For Ethan, it was enough. The distance between strangers had narrowed, and a fragile connection had begun to form beneath the streetlight. In that moment, he realized that sometimes the first step in saving someone else is simply showing them they are not invisible. And tonight, standing under the soft glow of the street lamp, that realization felt like the beginning of something neither of them fully understood, but both could already feel deep in their hearts. The rain didn't stop, but for the first time it felt less like an obstacle and more like a companion, carrying with it the quiet possibility of healing, trust, and perhaps the first sparks of hope. The rain had eased to a soft drizzle, tapping gently on the rooftops and flowing along the slick pavement. Ethan and Lily continued walking slowly, side by side, each lost in their own thoughts. The night felt heavier somehow, charged with unspoken emotions that neither had yet fully revealed. Yet, in this quiet, it felt safe, a fragile bubble that existed only for them. After a long silence, Ethan finally spoke, his voice low, almost hesitant. Sometimes the storms outside remind me of the ones I've carried inside for years. He glanced at Lily, noticing the slight tilt of her head, the way her eyes seemed to search for understanding even in the dim glow of the streetlights. I've had my own reasons to feel lost. Lily didn't respond immediately, but the envelope in her hand shifted slightly. There was curiosity in her gaze now, a spark that hadn't been there before. She walked closer, as if sensing that he, too, carried invisible burdens. Ethan took a deep breath, forcing himself to begin. I lost someone important not too long ago, he said. Not in the way people usually lose someone, not to sickness or accident, but to circumstances I couldn't control. I wasn't there when it mattered, and I carry that regret every day. His voice trembled slightly, betraying emotions he usually kept buried. Lily's lips parted, but no words came. She simply listened, the rain dripping softly from her hair, mixing with the tears that still lingered in her eyes. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was a shared space, filled with understanding and recognition. I know how it feels to feel invisible, Ethan continued, voice low but steady. To feel like no one sees the weight of your heart or understands the things you carry. That feeling can make the world seem unbearable. He paused, letting his words sink in. It's why I couldn't just walk past you tonight. Lily swallowed hard, feeling the warmth of his empathy wrap around her like a protective cloak. For the first time, in what felt like years, she didn't have to hide. The weight she carried, the pain, the fear, the uncertainty could exist here without judgment. She could simply be. I think I understand, she said softly, her voice barely audible. I felt that too. Like no one sees me. Like the world would be easier if I disappeared. She shivered, not from the cold, but from the sudden rawness of admitting it aloud. Ethan reached out, lightly brushing a strand of rain-soaked hair from her face. You're here now, he said, and I see you, Lily. Really see you. That's something, isn't it? Even if it's just for tonight. She gave him a faint, hesitant smile. It was a small gesture, but in it, Ethan felt a flicker of hope, fragile yet undeniable. Two strangers, each broken in their own way, had found a moment of connection in the middle of a stormy night. And for the first time, Lily felt that maybe the weight of her heart could be shared, even just a little. The drizzle continued to fall, creating a soft curtain around them, isolating them from the rest of the city. For Ethan, every drop of rain was a reminder that life, no matter how heavy or painful, continued moving forward. And perhaps, sometimes, moving forward was easier when someone walked beside you. Someone who understood without needing to fix anything. Lily looked up at him, eyes glistening with unshod tears. "Thank you for stopping," she whispered. Ethan offered a small, reassuring smile. "I'll always stop if it matters," he said softly, "even for someone I don't know." And in that quiet night, under the soft glow of the streetlights and the gentle rhythm of the rain, two hearts each carrying invisible storms found a fragile solace in each other's presence, their footsteps echoing together on the wet streets, moving forward into the unknown. This is Emotion Waves, where every drop tells a story.